Welcome to this event. We are really excited to have all of you in the audience, especially our students. On behalf of the Tacoma Park Silver Spring campus, Vice President and Provost Brad Stewart, and the Department of AELP Linguistics and Communication Studies, it's my honor and privilege to welcome all of you to this special event, The Legacy and the Burden of History, a conversation with author Rion Amilcar Scott. I would also like to briefly introduce Professor Cinder Barnes-Cooper and Professor Karl Smith Karl is from the History and Political Science Department and Cinder's from the English Department, and they are going to join us on the stage to facilitate a conversation with our author. Before I introduce the author and share a little bit about his accolades, I'd also like to thank Professor Heather Satrom for organizing this interdisciplinary event between history, literature, language, and politics. Yay, Heather. I would also like to thank Professors Cooper and Professor Smith and the History and Political Science departments and all of their students for supporting the event. So now a little bit about our honoree. Rion Amilcar Scott is a 2013 Cambilio Fellow. His work has been published in journals such as the Kenyon Review, Club Orchid Review, Pank, The Rumpus, Fiction International, the Washington City Paper, The Toast, Akashic Books, Melville House and Confrontation, among others. A celebrated author and talented writer, a story of his earned first place on the Wigleaf Top 50 Very Short Fictions of 2016 and 2013. And one of his essays was listed as a notable and Best American Essays 2015. Most recently, he was nominated for the Penn Robert W. Bingham Prize for Debut Fiction, which honors debut authors whose first novel or collection of stories represents distinguished literary achievement and suggests great promise. His short story collection, Insurrections, University Press of Kentucky, was published in August 2016 and was chosen for the Rumpus Book Club. His next publication, Wolf Tickets, is forthcoming from Tiny Hardcore Press. Mr. Scott is a hometown fellow. He was born and raised in Silver Spring, Maryland, and he is a former Montgomery College student. He earned an MFA from George Mason University, where he won both the Mary Roberts Reinhardt Award and a completion fellowship. As an English Department Mason alum, I know that GMU is very proud of his successful writing career. Mr. Scott is currently an English faculty member at Bowie State University. Professor Smith will now give us a little bit of guidelines and an overview of today's event.
Thank you, Monica. Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see all of you here. I'm just going to be just saying a few things about Mr. Scott before he comes out. But basically what will happen is we're going to be engaging in a conversation, asking some general questions about his work, about the historical context, and then we'll be inviting you to ask some questions up, and we'll have mics set up for that, so we'll let you know when that gets started. I think that's the only thing I have to say. All right? Please, would you all welcome Rion Amilcar Scott. So, let me just convey to you, to some of you who have not read his work, and just let me just say a couple things about it and why I think it's so interesting to have him here. I think for you all who are students, you can see a path to success that Rion has achieved. You know, he came here, he's from this area, and he's gone on and he's a published author now. The other thing I think is so interesting for his work is that he takes what we all see every day and makes it into a fascinating, provocative story. And what I mean is the stuff that happens within our families, in our houses, in our homes, but also things like what happens in the Safeway, or what happens when there's a flood, and what happens in all these other things. So I just think it's wonderful storytelling that he has achieved here. And I just love that local flavor for it. And now, one thing I'm going to start with asking a question is, Rion, you grew up in Littonsville?
I grew up near Littonsville.
Okay. And I was just wondering, in your stories, there's this place called Cross River. And Cross River is an African-American community, predominantly African-American community, where these people have these interesting intersections of their lives. So I just wanted to ask you, first of all, can you tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up in Littonsville, and did that inform your creation of this place called Cross River, or how did that inform your creation of Cross River?
Well, I mean, growing up in the community wasn't, Silver Spring, wasn't as bustling as it was now. It was really not much here. But it was a very, it was kind of like everybody knew each other, sort of community. And I would say how it influenced it is it influenced it in a way that I didn't even realize it was influenced. And I was reading the Washington Post out of Littonsville, which is sort of adjacent to where I grew up, but it's also connected. How it was founded by a freed slave, and how the side of the bridge, that I lived on during segregation was a black community, and the bridge linked the black and white community. These are things that I didn't know at all. But I see in my work, right? There's a bridge in my work that's based on the bridge that links Cross River to my other made-up community, Port Yucca, Virginia, and then Cross River was founded after a successful slave revolt. Now, as you may know, in this country there were no successful slave revolts. They were all put down, but in Haiti there was a successful slave revolt. So in my world, they were after the Haitian Revolution, it inspired a great insurrection that created Cross River.
And now we would like for you to read a passage from Insurrections, if you wouldn't mind reading a passage from page 184.
Follow him.
Okay, so this is from a story, the final story in the book 3, Insurrection, and you'll have to bear with me because this is in it's in a Trinidadian dialect. My parents are both from Trinidad and Tobago, and this story was inspired by interviews I did with my father about his time coming over in the 1960s, and one of the most interesting thing he told me was about his time participating in the riots that followed the killing of Martin Luther King. So in this section, the character Neville Sampson is joining the rioters. Our swarm, it moved like a flock of birds, all these beautiful black people in motion, moving and shifting with a kind of intelligence. When we reach the destination, we just know it. That shining palace on the hill overlooking Rhode Island Avenue, the Safeway. We get to the place, and all of we stand there watching, and a manager, a short, little, bald, pink, fat white man in an apron standing out front. I recognize him in his tiny, condescending eyes. A black person asking him questions, and he real curt. That man wouldn't let me return some bad chicken I bought there earlier in the day one time. You think they could act like that out in Bethesda? Safeway had a lot to answer for, Ken. I hated going to that place. Please don't do this, the manager said. I'm thinking, why put your life on the line for a bunch of groceries? He must think Mr. Safeway go cry big tears at a funeral. Some guys surround him and they start shoving him back and forth and all around, passing him around man to man like a basketball. The manager pull away and run into the riot. Bad move. One of the fellas catchy and hitting one, bop, in the back of his head. I ain't feel bad about what happened to the Safeway. You go in there, you never see one of us working in front. The meat bad sometimes, and you point that out, You get one cussing from the manager or someone under him. Price is always $1 or $2 or $3 or $5 higher than some other places like the Giant up on Georgia Avenue. But it's not easy for me to get to the Giant most times. I never realized it before, but I resent Safeway like hell. From the moment I start shopping there until the moment we standing out in front, no one talking, but as a group we decide the store's fate. A teenager grab a big rock stone and crash the thing through the store window. I want to say, hey, we not done deciding, but I guess we finished. Something in me, maybe something by my heart, it tell me to turn around, go home. But then I see it clear as clear. The man King standing there on the cover of his book with his arms folded. Title say, Why We Can't Wait.
That was great. The only thing I wanted to ask you was, I think that Safeway is gone now, right?
That Safeway is gone. It was there through my time at Howard. It was there, but it's gone now.
The one on Rhode Island?
Yep.
Yeah, I
Near
think
H
that's
Street.
it's a big lot, something now. Or Save a Lot? Is that the name of it?
I'm not sure what it is now. I can't remember, but it's still shaped like a Safeway. So.
But did that all really happen? And your father was a part of that? Did he witness that?
He witnessed that. It's embellished a lot that moment, but he actually did go to the Safeway and start and join the rioters. And I started doing some research after my father was telling me about it. And there was a book, I believe it's called City on Fire. It's about the days of after Martin Luther King was assassinated. And I got to this section where they talk about how Safeway was seen as a racist institution, and it took heavy damage in the riots. And Giant took no damage at all because they were seen as friendly to the community. It just corroborated what my father said. This is a small thing, but oftentimes what I'm writing about is how history shapes us and molds us. And then I started thinking about, well, there's a reason why I didn't really like Safeway growing up, even though I didn't know.
I didn't know either. I hope there's nobody in the audience from Safeway representing.
Well, going back to that issue of writing about what you know and writing about the history of a community, Cross River seems like a very proud community, a community with a proud history. And it's rooted in the pride for this successful insurrection. But one of the issues we saw, and my students saw, and friends of ours, we were talking about Cross River and insurrection, is the community seems so broken. It seems like there's poverty, there's some pathologies there, some despair. How should we take those problems of Cross River? Is it rooted in its past of insurrection like Haiti? Can we assume that there were some correlations there? Could you share with us?
I think the despair and sadness you see in Cross River is the weariness. I think after people free themselves, there's an expectation, right, that you're going into a utopia, and I think for Black people in America there's often this expectation that we should be past a lot of things, and then there's this weariness when it comes back that we're not past certain things, being seen a certain way, being treated a certain way, and the weariness just makes you tired.
How come we're not past those things yet? Why do you think that hasn't happened yet?
I think the person to answer that has more degrees than I do. But I mean, as humans, we find ways to divide ourselves, and I think that there's systemic racism is benefits people. People hold on to those benefits. It's difficult to give up some of the privileges you have once you even recognize them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we were having a mini book group discussion last week preparing for our talk, and one of the things that Professor Smith talked about was after the Haitian Revolution, and how we think about Haiti as being, the only successful slave insurrection. And we still see Haiti suffering today from systemic racism and poverty. And I'd just like for Professor Smith to kind of give us a little bit, he's not expecting this, a little bit of insight into how history has created the Haiti that we have today, some of the policies that came about.
Right. Well, yeah, thank you. I won't go on too long, I promise. But Haiti did have a successful slave revolt soon after the success of the American Revolution and the French Revolution. And it was almost as if the people in Haiti recognized that there was this people striving for liberty and freedom and self-determination. And they looked at France doing it, and they looked at the United States doing it and said, well, why can't we do that? So it was a very successful slave revolt. They were able to throw out the French. But one of the things that happened after that is that the French imposed a kind of penalty on the Haitians for their successful slave revolt. They did not recognize the successors of the slaves to running the country, and then also they expected compensation for the loss of revenue. Haiti was very much a piggy bank for the French back then. It was producing sugar cane, and it was sugar was much in demand, and so there was tons of money coming into France thanks to Haiti. So after the slave revolt, the French lost that revenue stream, and instead of going to the Haitians and saying, thanks so much for your help, well, not so much for your help, but thanks so much, congratulations, you're a free country, you're now our equal. They didn't say that. Instead, they said, well, you owe us money now. And that set up Haiti for that stumbling block when it began, because instead of having sort of a zero on your books, you're beginning with serious amounts of debt. And that continued on well into until we got into the 20th century. So talk about systematic racism and the things that you saw in Cross River, reflected in your community and Cross River in your book. I think it's also something that we have to understand happened not just there, but it happened in places like Haiti, and perhaps in places in Africa today that are still experiencing the post-colonial sort of struggles.
And speaking to that experience, we'd like for you to read another passage for us. This one is from page 53 and 54, because I think it goes right along with what Professor Smith was alluding to about the history.
So this passage is from a story called Boxing Day, and it's in this story it's about a father and son, and the father is experiencing a depression, and it sort of affects the entire family. Daddy is in one of his moods, that steady, persistent, low-level blue. Every word is a bomb filled with cynicism. I'm always surprised by the burn of his napalm. That morning I woke early to catch some cartoons in the basement. My father says I'm too old for cartoons, so I didn't want him to see me slink downstairs. As I rounded the corner and approached the stairhead, I saw Daddy with his gloves hanging about his neck from a set of black strings. Stay up here, kid, he said. I'm about to beat that thing till it cries. Yep, gonna be down there a while. He doesn't need to say, I don't want you around. His shrug, the curt dance of his eyes, they speak for him. Daddy's blue moods never care about anyone. Every minute when he's like this, I'm in a four-dimensional world made of endless time. Hours lay next to hours, hours stacked atop hours into the sky. This broken man reeling from daily compromise, sarcasm and boxing, the only things keeping him together. As for me, I'm one of the many chains around his neck that hold him in a cold, tiny basement of mediocrity.
That was great. I relate to the guy in the basement. Yeah. Not
As
me
do I.
personally, but black men in my family. I think he said, was it sarcasm and
Sarcasm and boxing, the only things holding him together.
sarcasm boxing? I think for some people in my family, I grew up in Detroit. It was sarcasm and going to the factory and working that job and getting a paycheck. But that, I think, connects well to the next question we wanted to ask you, which is that it seems like there are some middle-class black characters and middle-class black families in Cross River. But it seems that a lot of them are very close to failure or some kind of thing that drags them back down into a state of despair or unemployment or such things like that. I'm thinking of, for example, the narrator in Juba. Juba is one of the stories that Rion wrote about a case of mistaken identity. I'm also thinking of Lewis Smith in Party Animal. He also is the same sort of situation. He seemed like he was a kid in elementary school who was up and coming and had a future. One thing happened to him. He got sort of tagged with it for life, and the next thing we know, he's living in the woods as a wild man. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to that. Like, is that something you see for middle-class African Americans, that they are that close to falling down, or where does that come from?
Yeah, one thing I didn't realize is that being middle class and black is not the same thing as being middle class and white. I've been reading. I've been reading about how that black communities, of a certain financial, $100,000 for a black family in black communities just doesn't go as far as it would in white communities, and it's and I think that it's there's a history of redlining that has caused this. These things have been sort of planned, and it's and I think it's it's very it can be very, very frustrating to realize that if you are what is upper middle class for other people, you're sort of living not as well.
So that's what's going on with those characters. They're emblematic of that.
I think so. One thing about Boxing Day is when I was younger, as for me, as an adult now, I sort of see the things that my parents had to deal with, and it's these cycles that we go through.
So I'm going off script here for a minute.
Okay.
Because I want to go back to this line that I think in our book group, all of us had written down or had highlighted that you just read. You said, "As for me, I'm one of the many chains around his neck that hold him in a cold, tiny basement of mediocrity." And I noticed that theme kind of throughout the works that dealt with family. I saw it in Good Times, the first one. This character is a success by all means. He has a PhD, a wife, and child. Yet he still seems to struggle with depression and suicidal ideation. Tell me a little bit about family in your work, and particularly family for the black man, from his perspective, as you wrote about it in these two stories.
Well, and I don't want to definitely point that these two characters are emblematic of the black family, emblematic. I think they're emblematic of these two characters. But and these two characters are obviously suffering from depression, and I think, in both of these instances, they have no idea how to deal with these depressions. And in Boxing Day, that line, it's sort of like it has a huge effect on this child, and the father doesn't even seem to realize it. How much his depression is spreading out, and attacking everybody else around him.
Another question we had may not be a fair question, but we're going to ask it anyway. Some of my colleagues were reading the stories, and we were thinking about the insight into the male characters' psyches. And we have maybe 3 female characters throughout the short stories, but not a lot about the black female experience. Often we saw in Checkmates, we have this burgeoning, woman who's coming into her own, and there seems to be a lot of possibility for her, probably more so than with any of the other characters. But how do you think about women and the representation of women in these short stories or in any of your works?
Okay. I tend to think that these stories, you're right, they mostly focus on the male characters and the struggles that they're going through. But I also focus on the way that the male characters, the way that what we call toxic masculinity nowadays, how that spreads out and affects and harms everyone around them. You see stories like in Friendly Game, in which these characters are so invested in this crazy and negative view of what masculinity is that it's they're trying to one up each other, and it harms everybody around them. And in The Legend of Ezekiel Marcus, it's the same thing. This guy is it's about a teacher who's he's an adult, but he feels that he needs to bond with his students by denigrating women, and so there's a focus to me in the stories. There's a focus on the ways that we misunderstand masculinity, and take masculinity as things that don't have anything to do with masculinity, violence, denigrating women, and that's a problem that needs to be addressed.
Well, I'd like to follow up a little bit on that question. I'm thinking about, I'm not a fiction writer, but I've been told that you should always think about who is your audience when you're getting ready to speak or getting ready to write something. So who do you imagine is your audience? And I guess I'm thinking also, if you're a young black woman, is there a story that you think she should be reading, or what would you say to her to get her into your stories?
Well, young black women and everybody else should read The Flowers by Alice Walker. Okay, so I wanted to plug my favorite short story of all time. And obviously I didn't write that, but I think that my audience, I'm gonna take a page from Toni Morrison. I write in the hopes that black people are reading my work. Of course, I want everybody to read my work. I want and love and respect everybody who's willing to read my work and take the idea seriously. I'm always going to write about Cross River, which is a black community. I'm always going to write about black people. I feel like there's a part of that question I missed. I didn't answer.
No, I think you got there.
Okay.
I think the main thing is, I don't know, if I were a person who had not read your work and sitting in the audience, I think I want to, okay, what's in it for me? What would I get out of that? Okay. And I think you did talk a little bit about that.
I didn't give a serious answer to what story the young women should read. They should read I think they should read The Slapsmith, in which it's a retelling of an Ernest Hemingway story, in which a young woman is accosted and eventually she fights back.
Yeah, I like that. That's the one with the she's on the train, right, with
Right.
her baby. Yeah, that is a good one. No, that's good. Thank you.
And you said that that's a retelling of an Ernest Hemingway story?
Ernest Hemingway is the battler. I changed the gender and race of the character. He's Nick Adams, and my story is Nicolette.
Okay. I did not know that. So I will read that again and reread Hemingway. I think you were starting to answer something about audience as well. A question that I had about audience. I think you said that you focus on Cross River and this Black community, and of course you want everyone to read, you want everyone to be a part of this audience. So I think part of some of the issues that people may have had is that they didn't identify with the characters and that they were confused. Some of my students said, I'm feeling weary, and I think it's intentional, part of this weariness. I had my own interpretation for part of the weariness, and I suggested, and a few students suggested, that if you feel weary reading it, imagine how we feel living it. So how do you address maybe an audience who would be unfamiliar with this weariness to keep moving forward and plugging through?
You know, in literature, the specific is found in the universal. That's how it is in most art, right? You know, when I read Night by Elie Wiesel, that's a very, very slim book and takes you right inside the Holocaust. It gave me greater empathy for people who have experienced that type of suffering, specifically Holocaust victims. You know, when I'm not I didn't come from a poor community. When I listened to Ready to Die by Notorious Big, it gave me an understanding of what that was like, and not just that, you know, it didn't just give me an empathy for him. It made me think about some of the frustrations and angers that I have. And that's what literature is, right? If you feel weary reading the book, you can close the book, you know. I can't when I'm driving through Prince George's County, you know, I can't stop thinking about what happened to Prince Jones, especially when I see blue and red lights behind me. And Prince Jones was a Howard University student who was killed by the police. They followed him from Hyattsville to Fairfax, two communities I know very well as being a George Mason student in Fairfax, and once living in Hyattsville. I can't stop thinking about that. And I think that when you read a book, it's like you're inoculating yourself. You inoculate yourself with just enough of the poison of sadness or weariness or whatever is the theme of the book, so that you can carry it on in life, and you can really understand that. If your grandmother dies in real life, you can't stop being sad about that. Grandmother dies in the story, and the character is and it's devastating you. You can close that book. But in terms of relating, you know, I think quote unquote relating is overrated. You know, I read Jewish literature. When I read Philip Roth, I don't say, you know, Philip, why aren't all the characters black males from Silver Spring, Maryland? Mm-hmm. No, I roll with it, and it's I find it important to be able to identify with people beyond our superficial details.
I so agree. Thank you for answering that question. We would like for you to read another passage, if that's okay.
That's cool.
That passage is from Juba, I think.
Okay.
91, page 91.
So in Juba, it's a story about a mistaken identity encounter in which a gentleman is walking down the street and he's stopped and accused of being a drug dealer named Juba, and he's not Juba, and he misses a job interview because of this. So I'm going to read a part from the end of the story where he actually meets Juba. You speak fast. It's hard to follow sometimes. The bald man's eyes danced in disbelief. I'm not rapping fast, Juba said. I'm just talking a different language than you. When two niggas from El Salvador get together and talk, neither one of them complain the other's all flashy speaking or whatever. It's just squares, the outsiders like you. Not me, I know Spanish. Like you that complain. You a river baby? I prefer CrossCovarian. Of course you do, he said. Bougie niggas always prefer CrossCovarian. It's better than being a baby, I replied. The problem is we always infantilize our people. Folks don't want to grow up and be men and women. The world would finally respect us if we just be men. Blah, 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 right and sure. Tell me, if y'all niggas got money and houses and things over there on the north side, and I can already tell you a north side nigga, then why y'all so cross? CrossCovarian literally means angry river person. You know that, right? Looks to me like Southside folks are more angry. That's where people get robbed and shot and stuff like that. Checkmate. I tell you what. You look like a true. I'll griff you some of that Star product if you give me a fumi. Huh? Juba sighed. The bald man grunted and crunched peanuts beneath his teeth. River babies don't even know their own tongue no more. Nigga, give me a cigarette and I'll sell you some weed. Shit, may even have a story or two to tell you.
Thank you. Thank you for reading. So, with Juba, could you explain a little bit the character, the myth, the symbol of Juba that you had in mind as you were writing the story?
Well, when I was at Howard University, I was walking down the street one day, and a guy stops me in the street. I was heading to work, and he says, "Hey," I don't know what name he gave. He said, "Hey, Billy." Let's say it was Billy. You still hustling, man? And I used to have long dreadlocks at the time, so people often confuse me for a drug dealer. And right at that moment, I thought, I said, this could be really bad. The police walk by and think a drug transaction is going on. What happened? He was, I don't know. What happened? Billy is somebody that owed him money or something like that. And I had to just extricate myself from the situation, and I did, and I went to work, and no big deal. So when I started thinking about this story, I started questioning what happened if it was a disaster. What happened if it turned into a situation where it was a problem? We see a lot of deaths from mistaken identity, But what the character comes to find out is that Juba, sure, he's a drug dealer, sure he sells weed, but he's also a linguist. He's also translating the Bible and other holy books into the language they speak in Cross River. He has a deep love for the language, and he's only selling weed to finance his linguistic habit. So,
I think that's so interesting, and Juba is probably one of my favorite characters in the short stories. With him being the linguist and this kind of griot as well, we have him examining the language of Cross River. How did you envision him being a linguist, but also this kind of mythical criminal figure?
Well, I think that none of us is one thing, and we tend to see people, particularly people we don't know, as hey, that's the A student, or that's the professor. But there are multiple things going on with each and every one of us, and I don't think that anyone should be discarded, for whatever reason.
That's great.
I'm sorry, I have another question, still related to Juba. But this one also relates to Party Animal, and these two stories, language is very important. And in Party Animal, there's the loss of language. What were you thinking when you had this character revert? I know seems like a parody, but language seems to be really important in the work. So could you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, as a writer and as a person, I've always loved language. You know, my work is always going to be examining language, and I love what we're calling nowadays African American vernacular English. I love it, absolutely. You know, so when I get together with my friends, we speak in that way. And one of the ideas behind Juba is that, you know, there are multiple Englishes. And I have respect and love for all of them. We should all have respect and love for all of them. So in Party Animal, you know, the character, you know, I think language is the thing that makes us human, right? Language, you know, before this chair existed, before this table, this building existed, it was a thought, and then someone translated that thought into words. And without language, you know, we don't have anything, right? Dogs don't have complex societies. You know, they're dependent on us. You know, and you know, other animals, they may have complex societies, but their complex societies aren't as coherent as ours, because they can't translate their abstract thoughts into words. And when Lewis loses his language, he loses a part of him. He loses his humanity.
Thank you.
Cool. Can I just say one more thing about Juba?
Yes, sir.
I love that story, and I felt like it was referencing the Black Lives Matter movement without explicitly saying this is about Black Lives Matter. I felt like after reading it, I felt like we could sell T-shirts that said "I am not Juba," because he kept saying that during the story. Because that's what he keeps saying throughout the story. Everybody's like, "Oh, you Juba," and he's like, "No, I am not Juba," and he just has to keep repeating and repeating it. It seemed to me like that was something that we see, and early in that story, the police, like you said, that's the situation that you referenced. The police came up on him thinking he was Juba, even though I think he was dressed to go to an interview. Mm-hmm. So presumably this character is dressed to go to an interview to be an accountant, right? So imagine you're dressed for an interview to be an accountant, but the police come along and mistaking you as a drug dealer, and they assume that you're Juba, right? So that to me spoke to what a lot of things that are happening when we hear about Black Lives Matter without, like I said, explicitly stating this is a Black Lives Matter story. Just wanted to put that out there.
Well, you know, I wrote that long before the Black Lives Matter movement actually started, and it took me a long time. I hope this doesn't make me sound unintelligent, but it took me a long time to connect that back. And I would agree that it's there, but it's only because, you know, before the Black Lives Matter movement happened, this has been going on for a very long time. Richard Pryor references this in his routines in the 60s. You read James Baldwin, he could have been writing yesterday. James Baldwin's been dead for 30-something years. Mm-hmm. And even previous to that, you read writings of black thinkers, you know, the police come up. And it's only now because of video, it's kind of like, oh yeah, what they were saying was true. Oh, we didn't know. So Juba, and like I said, I didn't connect it back. Because it was, you know, having this fear and these concerns is just like water for me. It's just there. It's part of life.
And I think that's the case for our students too, and you know, my family members and all over. It's water. It exists, right? But you know, there is a part of your work that kind of moves towards something bigger in the end. Before we get to that question, though, did you have another question, Professor Smith?
I'm good.
Okay. Did that answer about the
think
police
so.
brutality?
Yeah, I think so,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Well, we have one major question coming up, but this one should probably be asked after we read from 3 Insurrections, maybe passage from 186.
Okay.
190.
I'm sorry, you want me to read the passage from 186? From 186? 186, okay.
190.
Okay, so back to back, okay. Okay, so I'm going to start a little bit before 186. It's the character Neville Sampson is reflecting back on his time in Trinidad, and he finds this book called Three Insurrections in the library. I take it back to the library that day, and I ain't read it till I get to America and realize everybody reading these books. I'm sorry. The book that he's talking about is not Three Insurrections at this point. He's talking about another book, a Martin Luther King book. Teachers assign it in class. People talking about the Communist Manifesto and thing. Howard was real. The afternoon when I take it back to the library, I'm supposed to go play cricket. But when I get to the library, I see the book. The book. The fire is burning on the cover like an animated thing, you know, like the whole table on fire. And when I sit down, the flames start to speak the pages. Three Insurrections, that's the name of the book. I have a cricket match, you know, but who could remember cricket staring at all that beauty? I missed the damn game to read the book. All the insurrections sewn together like a beautiful garment on each page. The Haitians have an insurrection. The River Babies, the CrossCovarians, they have an insurrection. And there's one to come, and it's mentioned with the ones that happen like it's a piece of threaded gold passing through the garment. I don't see my name, but I see me. I see you, and you don't even exist. You're just a vague daydream in the back of the mind of two people who is on the same island, but who ain't meet till they travel thousands of miles to go to Howard. You was just a sperm that's 15 plus years from being manufactured and an egg resting inside your mother. Something make me left that book in the library, though. Maybe it was too much to take, the way it make my mind spin and spin. I wish the hell I had grabbed it and run. From then on, Cross River is burned in my brain. I never thought too much about what's to happen with me next. I knew I didn't want to stay teaching forever. Some people expect me to come headmaster like Daddy, take over where he left off. But that's not what I am. That's not who I am. I knew that. Whenever I think about the future after that day in the library, I hear Cross River whispering behind my thoughts. Maybe it's always been there. I don't know. I wouldn't doubt it. But what kind of people is this, I think? These Cross River folks bloody their masters and live free like they not afraid. The book talk about the Haitians too, but I hear about them plenty. The Cross-Riverians set off through the Americas trying to export. The Cross River Negroes is new to me. I see my island in a footnote. Some Cross Riverians set off through the Americas trying to export insurrection. Some even settle in Trinidad. The beauty that just hold them, even though they have slaves all over to free. I don't know much about our history before Daddy. Maybe he come from Cross River. How I know our people ain't take part in the Great Insurrection. And that is what draw me and your mother to our homeland, Cross River. Maybe, who knows, is all I'm saying, Ken. Okay, and so page 190. Okay. Not a day that go by after that I don't think about Cross River, that pipe. Every time I look around, it reminds me that the book exists somewhere and another insurrection go be happening sometime. And this is after he goes into he's thinking about he's gone into the store and he's looted, and the only thing he managed to loot is a pipe because he got scared and ran away, which actually really happened. Thinking about Cross River making me late to my wedding. Laugh, Ken, but you almost wasn't made because of Cross River. We flirt with moving back to Trinidad and moving to upstate New York, but the only thing we take serious is moving to this town. I go to law school at Howard again and get a job and thing, but when your sister is 3 or 4 and your brother is 5 or 6, we pack up all our things, no job, no nothing. People tell me you'd have a big Caribbean community in Cross River, and it's true and that nice and thing, but that's not why we move here. People ask me why I go Cross River. I say, we come to see the insurrection. I don't know what we think we go find. I don't know what we did find, but we find it. I want you to remember this, Ken. You are the only member of this family that is born into Cross River. The rest that we adopted. Cross River is you. That moment in the aisle is you. The Safeway aisle. Tell you the truth, when your brother Blair come a cop, I get disappointed. The son of Neville Sampson, a police? Nah, I feel like I ain't give him enough of what was in me in that moment during the riot. And your sister too damn reasonable for her own good. Sometimes, Ken, I think I give you too much of what was in me in that Safeway. You too damn miserable, but you, Akinsanya Abel Sampson, you are the CrossCovariance Dream. And I know you say that sound corny and thing, but when them people wrench themselves free, it's you they think about.
There's so much in there. So the first question is from the last part. What is the CrossCovariance Dream? And is it anything like the American Dream?
Good question.
The CrossCovariance Dream is whatever you as a reader want the CrossCovariance Dream to be after you've pulled everything together in this book and hopefully other books that I want to write. The CrossCovariance Dream is supposed to deal something with freedom, right? These big words, these big quote unquote corny words, right? But we need to bring those corny words back. Freedom, liberty, justice. That's what, and I don't necessarily think of the American Dream like that. You know, I tend to think of the American Dream as something that is something that's asking us, to worry about our individualistic selves, which I guess you need to do at some level. But if you're telling me that what I make, if I make the same amount, as a white person, I have to live in a community that's not as safe or not as not as nice, then the dream is always going to be something that's intangible, something that I'm chasing.
So let's make
American
America
dream,
great in the future rather than great again.
Thank you so much. So our last question before we start taking audience questions are next. So if our audience question people could start making their way to the front, we would appreciate that. But my last question is, what is a question? I've heard you give interviews before, and so I know some of these questions you've answered before, and I thank you for your patience in answering them again. But what's a question about this work that you wish you were asked that no one has asked you yet?
Okay. That's a good question. I guess no one ever asked me about about my favorite characters. No one.
Okay, so who's your favorite character and why?
I refuse to answer that question. No, I would say my favorite character is probably the father, Neville Sampson. I created Ken a very long time ago. Goes back to Howard University. I created Ken as a character who was failing college and wanted to and had dropped out of college. And I was failing college and I was not allowed to drop out of college as I wanted to and lived the dream as a writer in Paris with a scarf and a little hat, beret, yeah, and the people around me were there to make sure that I stay focused, and I write a lot based off writing. You can write a lot based off negative emotions, anger and fear and depression. A lot of good literature comes out of that. And if you're a writer, I would say it's good that you can take those things and use them. But Three Insurrections is a story based off love, right? The love I have for my family, right? Particularly my father, but the love I have for everyone else. And people that made ultimate sacrifices, that were forced to make sacrifices that are names I'll never know. So I sat with 3 Insurrections. It took me 3 years to write. I sat with my father for 3 interviews, and we sat and we talked, and I always thought that I would write more about Ken Sampson, and in the early drafts, he was, Ken Sampson was more of a part of it, but really, the father, became dominant. He took over the story, and I appreciate. It's ridiculous to say I appreciate that. I appreciate a fictional character for doing that. But yeah, I appreciate that the fictional character did that.
Great. But let me just say now for everyone, again, much gratitude to Rion for being here, answering these questions, talking to all of you. Thanks so much.